Hi everyone! In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can help support your pelvic floor without doing Kegel exercises. So here I have my pelvic model, and this green TheraBand is going to demonstrate the pelvic floor muscles. So we can see here that the pelvic floor muscles, they're going to span from your sits bone on the left to the one on the right, and then in the front, which is your pubic bone right here, and then in the back, so also known as your tailbone. So your pelvic floor really spans the base of the pelvis. And when a lot of people think about how can I strengthen my pelvic floor, how can I help support my pelvic organs to address symptoms like pelvic floor heaviness or prolapse, a lot of people will defer to doing Kegel exercises, which are also known as isolated pelvic floor muscle contractions. But in this video, I really wanted to demonstrate other exercises or more of a better anatomical understanding of how you can also improve your pelvic floor strength and coordination and support other than doing very boring and non-functional pelvic floor exercises. So one thing you can really think about is how can I position my hips and my feet to benefit my pelvic floor? And a lot of people don't realize that there is a strong foot hip pelvic floor connection. So if you just kind of look at your feet right now, why don't you tell me, like, are your feet facing forwards? Are they kind of toed out? Are they pointing inwards? Just kind of assess what the position of your feet are in. And you can also kind of trace that into your hips. So do you feel like your kneecaps are pointing outwards or your thigh bones are pointing outwards? Are they pointed facing forward or inwards? So one interesting translation up the chain that can happen is that if your feet are more toed out, in other words, your hips are more externally rotated, that can cause your pelvic floor muscles to kind of droop down a little bit. And when that happens, a lot of people might feel like their pelvic organs are kind of like dropping down, because you can see that when my feet are toed out, my pelvic floor muscles my sits bones will draw inwards, and my pelvic floor here will kind of sag a little bit. And when that happens, a lot of people tend to be kind of like grabbing those muscles, kind of always tightening them to really help support their organs. But if we have our feet or our toes pointed more straight forward or internally rotated, then that draws those sits bones away from each other, naturally providing a pelvic floor support. So you can see that those muscles kind of go into a top position. So if we think about toes out, hips out, pelvic floor muscles kind of slacken, it reduces the support of the organs, versus internal rotation of the hips or toes pointed more neutral or inwards is going to top the pelvic floor here, supporting the pelvic floor muscles and the pelvic organs. In other words, the pelvic floor muscles are naturally lifting up the pelvic organs. So if you are struggling with bladder prolapse, rectal prolapse, feel like things are kind of loose and hanging down, or things are feeling heavy in your pelvis, assess how you're standing, assess your feet position, assess your hips, and see if you can maybe change your foot and hip position. What I notice a lot is in many people with prolapse, they tend to have their hips more externally rotated. They tend to lack hip internal rotation and hip adduction. So hip internal rotation is like the knee coming in, the feet going out. So hip internal rotation would be this motion, external rotation would be this. So a lot of people tend to lack hip internal rotation, and you need hip internal rotation to help naturally support the pelvic floor. So if you're lacking hip internal rotation, highly recommend doing some exercises either to lengthen the external rotators, like the deep glutes, massage those deep glutes, or do exercises and stretches to strengthen your internal rotators, just help activate those in your day-to-day. And you can just start with checking out your standing position. Just by having your feet facing forward, sometimes a lot of my patients notice, wow, I feel like there's like a stretch in my glutes. And that's because you're just naturally stretching and opening up those back muscles, those muscles that maybe gripping too much. So I hope this video was helpful in understanding other exercises or other strategies to help naturally support your pelvic floor without doing Kegels.